Claire, don't forget to lock up. We're trusting you with the place, Jonah said, giving me one last glance before stepping out the door. Of course. Enjoy your trip, I replied, trying to muster a sincere smile. I watched as Jonah walked away, the door shutting softly behind him. The house suddenly felt bigger, emptier, even though Jonah's parents were still around somewhere. I sighed, turning the lock with a decisive click. That's when the reality of my situation hit me again. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. My work laptop awaited me on the dining table, competing with the clutter left by my in-laws. Gregory's golf magazines and Ellen's knitting projects had taken over every available surface. Our once tidy home now felt like a chaotic battleground. Claire, could you be a dear and make some tea? Ellen's voice floated in from the living room. My jaw clenched, but instead of answering, I grit my teeth and filled the kettle with water. I was getting used to these constant requests, though each one chipped away at my patience. I glanced at the stack of bills accumulating next to my laptop, frustrated that no one else seemed to notice or care. Jonah and I had been happy once, before his parents moved in unannounced. We hadn't even celebrated our first anniversary when they showed up, their car loaded with luggage and the announcement, "We need to stay for just a while, dear." That while had now stretched into months. Claire, you should come and sit with us, Gregory called out. His tone was always commanding, never quite asking. Feeling cornered, I obliged, carrying Ellen's tea into the cluttered living room. She took it without a word of thanks, her attention glued to the television. So, Jonah mentioned your project is going well, Gregory began, his eyes flicking over my disheveled appearance. Good for you. Yeah, it's keeping me busy, I replied, forcing myself to sit on the edge of the couch. Busy is good, but don't forget your duties at home, Ellen added, stirring her tea with a patronizing smile. The conversation was always the same. Any success I had at work was downplayed, overshadowed by their narrow views of my responsibilities. Jonah's lack of action grated on me, his unwillingness to confront them only making things worse. Claire, Jonah had said a week ago, looking anxious, they're just old and set in their ways. It'll get better. But it hadn't. As much as I loved Jonah, his optimism felt like a betrayal. To him, keeping the peace with his parents was paramount, but for me, it was making life unbearable. I bit my tongue once more, swallowing the retort forming in my mind. A notification pinged on my laptop, a reminder of the client meeting I had in 10 minutes. I need to get back to work, I stated, rising from my precarious seat on the couch. My heart pounded, every interaction with them feeling like a test of endurance. Gregory waved me off dismissively, eyes returning to his newspaper. Ellen merely nodded, engrossed in her knitting. Back at the table, I pushed aside their clutter to make room for my work, the weight of my situation pressing down on me once again. I wondered how many more facades I could wear, how many more compromises I could stomach. Jonah's easygoing nature felt like a distant memory, replaced by an unsettling complacency. My idyllic visions of married life crumbled with each passing day, shadowed by the constant presence of his parents. The kettle whistled, its sharp sound piercing through my reverie. Another tea break for Ellen, another test of patience for me. As I poured the boiling water, I looked out the window, wondering if I'd ever reclaim the peace I'd once envisioned for our home. Endless days of small sacrifices loomed ahead, but deep down, a flicker of determination sparked. Something had to give, and I wouldn't let it be myself. Claire, there's something wrong with the dishwasher again. It never happens when Jonah uses it. Ellen's voice cut through my focus as I worked at the dining table. I clenched the edge of my laptop, taking a quick breath. Jonah doesn't even know how to use it. He never cleans up. I fired back, trying to keep my voice steady. Ellen's eyes narrowed. That's because he works hard all day, unlike you, who can work from home and still manage to mess things up. I got up and walked to the kitchen, trying to kill the conversation. Ellen trailed behind me, her disapproving presence filling the space. I opened the dishwasher, fiddling with the controls just to do something with my hands. Gregory appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smug look. You wouldn't have these issues if you just did things right, Claire. My patience was wearing thin. Maybe you two could help out once in a while, I snapped, unable to hold back. Gregory chuckled, the sound grating my nerves. Help? We're guests here. It's your job to make us comfortable. I slammed the dishwasher shut. It was clear nothing I said would matter. Retreating to the dining table, I tried to bury myself in work, but their voices kept pulling me back into the toxic atmosphere. Jonah appeared briefly in the evening, but his presence did little to ease the tension. "Hey, Claire, everything all right?" he asked, looking between me and his parents. "Just peachy," I replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Your parents seem to think I'm the maid." Ellen piped up, "We only ask for small favors. Jonah, Claire should be able to handle it." Jonah frowned, glancing at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, Claire. Can we talk about this later?" I pushed my chair back, frustration boiling over. "No, Jonah, we need to talk about this now." But he wilted, his eyes darting back to his parents. "Another time, okay?" he said softly. I walked away, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. Their manipulation and his avoidance were driving a wedge deeper and deeper. Upstairs, I checked my credit card statement on a whim and froze. "Jonah!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. He scrambled up the stairs, his parents close behind. "What is it?" he asked, bewildered. "Did you use my credit card?" I demanded, showing him the statement with luxury purchases I never made. Jonah looked blank. "No, I didn't." Gregory stepped forward. "We did. We needed a few things, and we assumed it was fine." "You assumed," I repeated, disbelief lacing my voice. "You charged thousands of dollars without asking?" Ellen's face turned cold. "We're family. What's yours is theirs, too." "No," I said, shaking with fury. "That's not how this works." I threw the credit card on the bed, fighting a scream. Jonah looked helpless, his face pale. "I'll talk to them, Claire. I promise." I backed away, disgusted. "Promises mean nothing if you don't act on them, Jonah," I said, storming out of the room, leaving them to stew in the mess they created. Their voices continued downstairs, but I tuned them out, feeling more isolated than ever. I needed a plan, something to reclaim my life. That's when a burning resolve started to form. Enough was enough. It was high time things changed, and I was going to make sure they did. Days blurred together as I threw myself into work. Projects piled up, deadlines loomed, but I found a strange solace in my tasks. Each design, each client meeting kept me away from the chaos at home. My colleagues noticed my dedication to the job, offering words of encouragement and praise. "Claire," Ryan said, leaning on my cubicle wall, "you're on fire lately. How do you do it?" "It's called survival," I joked, though a part of me meant it. Ryan laughed. "Well, keep it up. Management's noticed. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a promotion in your future." His words lit a small spark of hope. At least one part of my life was under control. Back home, things were as unbearable as ever. Gregory and Ellen's dominance grew stronger by the day. They moved my belongings without asking, filled the house with their things, and hovered over every aspect of my life. It was suffocating. One evening, I came home to find Ellen rearranging my office. "Ellen, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice strained from a long day. "Your space was too cluttered." "I'm organizing it," she replied nonchalantly. My jaw clenched. "I like my things where they were." "Well, it's better this way," she insisted, not bothering to pause. At dinner, the conversation turned acidic. "Claire, maybe you should take cooking classes," Gregory suggested with a smirk. "Your meals could use some improvement." I stared at him, wondering how he could be so condescending. "Maybe you should appreciate the fact that I'm cooking at all." Gregory chuckled, turning to Jonah. "See, son, this is what I mean. A little gratitude goes a long way." Jonah looked uneasy, trapped between us. "Let's just eat," he said, attempting to steer clear of another confrontation. The final straw came when I checked my bank account and found another series of unauthorized transactions. This time, it was for an expensive spa package. I stormed into the living room, holding the bank statement in my hand. "More charges, really?" I yelled. "You spent $1,200 on a spa?" Ellen barely looked up from her knitting. "Relax, Claire. It was just a treat. We needed it." "You needed it? How about asking before using my money?" I spat. Gregory looked up from his newspaper, unfazed. "This isn't all your money, Claire. We're family." "No, this is theft," I countered, my voice shaking with rage. The tension in the room thickened. Jonah stepped in, trying to mediate. "Claire, we'll sort this out, right, Mom? Dad?" Ellen and Gregory shrugged, clearly not taking it seriously. Jonah's attempts to placate me only deepened my feeling of betrayal. I left the room, retreating to my work once again, using it as my only escape. Then the promotion came. Management called me in, offering me a senior graphic designer role. The additional workload meant more time at the office, and I clung to the opportunity like a lifeline. I spent longer hours at work, enjoying the camaraderie of my colleagues and the satisfaction of my achievements. At home, I distanced myself, focusing on my future. The bitterness I felt towards Jonah and his parents grew, fueling my determination to take action. Late one night, as I walked through the empty office, Ryan found me packing up. Big plans for the weekend? More work, I admitted. Keeps me sane. He nodded. If you ever need to talk, you know where to find me. His support gave me a momentary reprieve, but I knew my real battle lay ahead. It was time to reclaim my life, no matter the cost. I started to outline my next steps, every small detail fueling my resolve. I opened the front door to find a note taped to it. Gone for a week, back soon. It read in Ellen's flowery handwriting. My heart sank and then spiked in anger. They hadn't mentioned any trip, let alone asked for permission to leave like this. My mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was certain. I was done being their doormat. I walked inside, each step echoing through the empty house. The kitchen was a mess, unwashed dishes piled in the sink, crumbs scattered across the counters. The living room was no better. The TV was left on, magazines were strewn everywhere, and Ellen's knitting needles lay tangled on the coffee table. Unbelievable, I muttered, grabbing a trash bag. As I worked my way through the house, I spotted my credit card bill on the dining table. My hands trembled as I opened it, each charge feeling like a slap in the face. My eyes widened, seeing several $1,000s spent on their spontaneous trip. I dialed Jonah's number, fury boiling inside me. "Hey, Claire," he answered, sounding oddly relaxed. "Where the hell are you?" I demanded. We decided to take a quick trip to Las Vegas," he stammered. "I thought I told you." "No, you didn't," I hissed. "And you used my credit card again." "Claire, it's not like that," Jonah tried to explain, but my patience snapped. "You took them on a vacation with my money while I'm here working my tail off?" I shouted. Silence followed on his end, an indication of his usual avoidance strategy. "You know what? Enjoy your trip," I said icily, and hung up. Alone in the house, my rage fueled my next steps. I called a lawyer first thing in the morning. "I need to discuss selling a house," I said, setting an urgent appointment. Next, I contacted a real estate agent. "I want the house on the market immediately." I instructed. "How fast can we move?" "With the current market, pretty quickly," the agent replied. "We'll start the paperwork right away." I spent the next few days stealthily packing my belongings. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. With each box taped up, my resolve strengthened. I also found a small apartment downtown, perfect for a fresh start. The sense of reclaiming control over my life was exhilarating. I walked through each room of the house, making mental notes of what to take and what to leave behind. The thought of selling everything they had taken over was the sweetest form of revenge. Jonah tried calling several times, but I ignored each one. I needed clarity, and his excuses only fogged it up. Every box packed was a step closer to my freedom, and a step farther from the prison my home had become. With everything organized and the house ready for sale, I spent my last night there. It felt surreal, like shedding an old skin. The space was empty, just like the emotional void left by Jonah and his parents. I could almost hear their voices, bossing me around, belittling me. But now, I no longer cared. The deed was done. By the time they returned, they wouldn't recognize the place nor their control over it. With a last look around, I locked the door, stepping out into the cool night air, savoring the first taste of freedom and the sweet scent of impending karma. The door creaked shut behind me as I entered my new apartment, a small, tidy space downtown. My boxes were neatly stacked along the wall, and the sight of them made me feel a deep sense of accomplishment. One by one, I began unpacking, placing my things exactly where I wanted them, this time with no interference. I had arrangements to make. First, I visited my lawyer. "Claire, everything looks in order," she confirmed, flipping through the documents she had prepared. "If you're sure about this, we can push the sale through quickly." "Do it," I replied without hesitation. Next stop was the real estate agent's office. "The house is now listed," she informed me. "I've already had several inquiries." "Great," I said, feeling a spark of satisfaction. "Let's make it happen as fast as possible." As the days passed, I balanced work and my covert operation. By day, I was the diligent graphic designer, throwing myself into my new role. By night, I moved essentials into the apartment, making it feel more like home. The only messages I received from Jonah were attempts to soothe my burning anger, but they went unanswered. One particular evening, I found myself in the office late, a usual occurrence now. Ryan, my colleague, noticed me as he packed up to leave. "Burning the midnight oil again?" he asked, coming to lean on my desk. "Yeah, lots to do," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Want to grab a coffee? You look like you could use a break," he offered. "Sure," I agreed, realizing that a bit of normalcy could do me some good. At the cafe, we sipped our drinks in a comfortable silence before Ryan broke it. "Something's been bugging you," he said, more of a statement than a question. I sighed, deciding if I should burden him with my mess. "It's complicated at home," I finally admitted. "If you ever need help, I'm here," he said, his sincerity touching me in ways Jonah's evasions never did. "Thanks, Ryan," I said softly, appreciating the gesture more than he knew. The next morning, I received a call from my real estate agent. "Claire, we have a buyer," she announced. "They're offering more than the asking price and want to close quickly." "Let's do it," I said, feeling elated. The final pieces were falling into place. With the sale nearly complete, I returned to my apartment, envisioning the look on Jonah and his parents' faces when they returned. They wouldn't know what hit them. The last detail involved formalizing the divorce. I made sure the papers were prepared and ready for when they returned. My plan was airtight, each step meticulously thought out and executed. Packing the last of my belongings from the house, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had no regrets. They had pushed me to this point, and now they would face the consequences. I locked the door one final time, leaving the key under the mat with a note. "We're done." I stepped away, my new life awaiting me. The control I had fought so hard to reclaim was finally mine, and as I walked towards my future, the weight lifted from my shoulders and was replaced by a renewed strength. I stood by the window of my new apartment, watching the minute hand on the clock crawl. Any moment now they'd come back from their trip. I could almost picture their confused faces when they found themselves locked out. It wasn't long before my phone buzzed. It was Jonah. I let it ring twice before picking up. "What's happening here? We can't get into the house," he yelled, his voice frantic. "I sold it," I said calmly. There was silence on the other end of the line. "You? What?" Jonah finally spluttered. "I sold the house. It's done," I repeated, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. "You can't do that. This is our home." Ellen's voice shrieked in the background. "No," I replied, my voice cold as steel. "It was my home. You've been nothing but uninvited guests." Jonah was silent, too stunned to respond. Ellen grabbed the phone from him. "We'll see about this, Claire. We'll get a lawyer. You'll regret this," she threatened. "Do whatever you feel you need to," I said, unbothered. "But the paperwork is ironclad. You'll find no loopholes." On the other end, I could hear Gregory cursing. "This isn't over, Claire," he snarled before the call dropped. I sighed, placing my phone on the counter. I glanced around my new apartment, feeling the first threads of true peace. The next morning I stood by my lawyer's office, ready for the storm. Jonah, Ellen, and Gregory arrived, their faces a mixture of fury and desperation. I stepped outside to meet them. "Claire, let's be reasonable," Jonah started, his voice wavering. "We can work this out." "We tried," I countered. "You chose them over our marriage time and time again. This is the result." Ellen stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "We took you in, treated you like family." "Your idea of family is using me as a bank and a maid," I fired back. "That's not family." Gregory leered at me. "You'll pay for this, Claire." "No, I'm done paying," I answered firmly, handing Jonah the divorce papers. "Sign these. We're finished." The neighbors nearby began to gather, their curiosity piqued by the spectacle. Jonah glanced at the growing audience, his face flushed with embarrassment. Ellen looked ready to burst, her hands shaking as she snatched the papers from me. "You can't do this," she screamed. "We'll fight you." But their threats fell flat. "Go ahead," I said loudly, making sure the neighbors heard. "But you'll find that legally, you've got no standing. This is my house, my money, and now, my life." Gregory tried to lunge at me, but Jonah held him back, looking defeated. "Just sign the papers, Dad. We have no choice." Ellen gave a final, venomous glare before grabbing a pen and signing the papers with trembling hands. Gregory followed, his anger palpable. Jonah was last, his eyes locking with mine one final time before he signed. "Goodbye, Jonah," I said, turning to leave. The weight of revenge lifted, replaced by a lighter, unburdened spirit. I felt empowered and strong, walking away from the chaos they tried to bind me in. Back at my apartment, I smiled genuinely for the first time in months. It was over. Finally, truly over. The power they had wielded was gone, and in its place, I found my freedom. As the door clicked shut behind me, I knew without a doubt that my new chapter had just begun. In the days following the confrontation, the fallout was swift and dramatic. Jonah, Ellen, and Gregory scrambled to find a place to stay, thrown into disarray. I heard through the grapevine that they had checked into a cheap motel nearby, their former grandeur reduced to complaining about the thin walls and bad service. My days, however, were looking brighter. The air in my new apartment seemed fresher, every small action of my newfound freedom. At work, things were electric. My colleagues noticed a spring in my step, and more than one asked what had changed. "Claire, you're glowing," Ryan commented as we worked on a project. "Did something good happen?" "You could say that," I replied, a genuine smile forming. The feeling of taking back control was better than any spa day the Crosbys could have charged to my card. Meanwhile, Ellen and Gregory's attempts to save face were failing spectacularly. Gregory tried calling in favors from his business contacts, hoping someone would provide a temporary space or financial aid. The responses were as cold as his heart, each rejection a blow to his inflated ego. Ellen's threats of legal action fell apart quickly. My lawyer, Kate, was thorough and efficient. "Don't worry, Claire," she reassured me over the phone. "They have no grounds to stand on. You made sure of that." Their public disgrace brought a strange satisfaction. The neighbors talked in hushed tones about the family who had been so unceremoniously evicted. Each muttered word was a victory for me. The old me would have felt guilty, but no more. I was done with feeling sorry for them. Ellen, ever the instigator, couldn't resist calling me. "This isn't over, Claire. You'll pay for humiliating us," she spat through the phone. I chuckled, the sound surprising even me. "Ellen, your threats are empty. Move on." "I have." Click. I hung up, feeling lighter. Ryan, who'd overheard my side of the conversation, raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I said, my grin widening. Jonah showed up once at my apartment, a last-ditch effort. He looked harried, his eyes pleading. "Claire, please, can we talk?" I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Talk about what, Jonah? You made your choices." "I'm sorry," he started, but I cut him off. "Sorry isn't good enough," I said firmly. "You chose them over us, over me, and now you face the consequences." Jonah's shoulders sagged. I didn't know things would get this bad. "Well, they did, and now it's time for you to deal with it," I replied. "Goodbye, Jonah." Closing the door on him felt like closing a door on the last remnants of my past. I felt a rush of empowerment, a clear signal that I was moving forward. Ryan caught me after work that day. "You really are something, Claire," he said with admiration in his eyes. "Just doing what needed to be done," I replied simply. Back in my apartment, I toasted to my newfound peace. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life, my independence. The sight of Jonah, Ellen, and Gregory struggling was merely the cherry on top. I curled up with a book, the quiet of my space a comforting blanket. The drama was behind me, and the future ahead seemed full of promise. For the first time in a long while, I could envision a life free from manipulation and control, and that was the sweetest victory of all. Settling into my new apartment brought a sense of liberation I hadn't felt in years. I threw myself into my new role at work with gusto, thriving in the creative energy and camaraderie of my team. The promotion meant longer hours, but I welcomed them, relishing every new challenge that came my way. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Ryan caught me as I was packing up. "Hey, Claire, a few of us are going out for drinks. Care to join?" For a moment, I hesitated, then smiled. "Why not?" At the bar, the conversation flowed easily. Ryan and I exchanged stories, shared laughs. It felt good to unwind, surrounded by friends who respected me. "So you're finally free from that madhouse, huh?" Ryan said, clinking his glass against mine. "Yeah, it feels like I can finally breathe again," I replied, a genuine smile on my face. Despite the emotional fallout from the divorce, I found myself enjoying my independence. My days were full, my nights peaceful. The anxiety that once gripped me was replaced by a newfound sense of joy. One day, as I was leaving the office, my younger coworker, Ethan, caught up to me. "Hey, Claire, you got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" I asked, curious. Ethan looked a bit nervous, scratching the back of his head. "I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner sometime. Just the two of us." I blinked, caught off guard. "Dinner? Are you asking me out, Ethan?" He chuckled, a bit embarrassed. "Yeah, I guess I am." I smiled, considering his offer. "I'd like that." "When?" "How about tomorrow night? There's this great Italian place I know." "Sounds perfect," I said, feeling an unfamiliar flutter of excitement. The next evening, we met at the cozy Italian restaurant. Conversation flowed easily, and Ethan's youthful exuberance was infectious. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in a long time. "You seem different now," Ethan noted, twirling his fork. "Happier." "I am," I admitted. "It's been a tough journey, but I'm finally finding myself again." Ethan smiled warmly. "Well, I'm glad. You deserve to be happy." As the evening drew to a close, we walked back to my apartment. Ethan hesitated at the door, looking as if he wanted to say something. "Thank you for tonight," I said, breaking the silence. "I had a great time." "Me too," Ethan replied, leaning in for a quick, shy kiss on the cheek. "Good night, Claire." "Good night, Ethan," I said, closing the door and feeling a warmth spread through me. Inside, I sat down with a content sigh. Life was starting to unfold in ways I never imagined. The past was behind me, and a future full of possibilities lay ahead. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and I spent more time together. We explored the city, shared meals, and laughed late into the night. It was refreshing to be with someone who appreciated me for who I was, without any hidden agendas or manipulations. With each passing day, I realized how strong I had become. No more compromises, no more living under someone else's thumb. This was my life, and I was determined to live it on my own terms. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I felt a profound sense of peace. The chaos and drama of the past were behind me, replaced by a calm, steady happiness. This was my new chapter, a fresh start. And for the first time in a long while, I felt optimistic about the future, confident that I could handle whatever came my way.